Hi, I'm Gary Zacharias. Just recently, I went through Ephesians 5, and I thought, boy, there's a lot of good stuff in here regarding apologetics. So I want to walk you through at least some of those verses, and I'd like you to be thinking about apologetics as you read the Bible, how we are supposed to be confidently bringing people the good news about Jesus Christ and the fact that it's true. It's not something just that makes us feel good, but it's based in reality. So in Ephesians 5, let's take a look at verse 6. Let no one deceive you with empty words. That really struck me. I thought, do people get deceived these days? Yeah, big time. Can you think of some examples? I bet you can. There's a house near us, and so I took a picture of a sign that was in their front yard. In this house, we believe love is love, Black Lives Matter, no human is illegal, science is real, women's rights are human rights. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. Now, I don't doubt that people have some good intentions, but I looked at some of these slogans and I thought, boy, those are deceptive. And I have a talk on that called Refuting the Slogan, so I'm not going to get into that right now. But just think about some deceptions. Years back, a book came out called The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, sold millions of copies. It was full of deception in art, but more importantly, in the history of Christianity and in Jesus Christ himself and the Bible and things like that, full of deceptions. And it really did deceive a lot of people. I think about evolution. There's a lot of deception going on there. For example, you'll get a story of microevolution, something small within a species, and then they'll say, and that's the way evolution works. Well, in a small sense, but not changing animal to animal. So we get deceptions there. How about this one? Do you ever hear this? Trust your heart. What does the Bible say about that? The heart is deceitful and wicked beyond all measure. And all you have to do is live for a while and watch people and know your own heart to know that's true. How about this one? Christianity is anti-science, absolute deception. Modern Christianity came about because of Christianity. Science came about because of Christianity. All religions are pretty much the same. That's a lazy way of discussing religions, huh? It's a way to say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it," because religions are not the same. They have different kinds of gods, different methods of salvation, different things that they say happen to you after you die. There are huge differences between them. So how do we keep from being deceived? Let me just lay out a few possibilities. Do you remember the Bereans in the book of Acts? When Paul and others came, they looked in their scriptures to see if what they were being told was true or not. We honestly don't know theology as well as we ought to. I remember when people were talking about Islam and they would say, well, Allah is the same as the Christian God. So we're all worshiping the same God. Well, that means you don't really know theology very well. Allah is not the same God as the God of the Bible. We can ask for definitions and clarification. When somebody says to you, oh, evolution has been proved, we can ask a simple question. What do you mean by that? Because they may not be talking about the same term that we think they're talking about. We should have some resources. Do you remember there's an ad for, I think it's a credit card company that says, what's in your wallet? Well, this is a slightly different spin on that. What's on your shelf? Do you have some resources available? And if not on your shelf, can you go online and find some resources? I bet you can. There are plenty of good ones out there. All right, let's move ahead. Verse 9. This is Ephesians 5 again. The fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. So I want to focus especially on truth. What does Paul say here? All goodness, righteousness, and truth. Well, what's going on with truth today? It's subjective. That's called relativism. Truth is within you. There's no external truth. It's within you. It's how you feel about things. It's up to the individual. It occurs inside a person. What's true for you? You ever hear that kind of thing? But you hear it especially in areas like religion and art and morality. Well, that's your truth. True for you. Yeah. But Christianity says no, it's based on objective truth claims. Jesus is not just the right savior for an individual. The claim in the Bible, in the New Testament, is Jesus is for everybody. It's objectively true, not just true for you. Are there problems with this new view? Oh, Yeah, it's harmful. It leads to moral relativism. If everything's up to the individual, there are no morals out there that we should all be following. Each person can march to his or her own drummer. Can you imagine the anarchy that comes with that? It leads to religious pluralism. If there is no real truth, it's just up to the individual, then every religion is equally valid, equally true. And that makes no sense at all, does it? Just from a philosophical perspective, how can Islam and Buddhism and Christianity and Wicca and all these others, how can they be equally true? They come to very different conclusions about everything. It really encourages mental laziness. It's just a way to say, I don't want to deal with this. It discourages dialogue. You come to somebody and say, Jesus died for the sins of the world, and they say, that's your opinion. Well, then we're kind of done, aren't we? Where can you go after that? Frankly, it creates a lot of despair. If there's no truth, why are we in school? Why are we reading books? We're reading what somebody else claims is true. That's only true for them anyway. We lose all hope in that kind of a situation. Let's go back to Ephesians 5. Look at verse 11. Paul says to expose them. He's been talking about fruitless deeds of darkness. So expose them. How do we do this? He doesn't say ignore it. He says expose them. So how do we deal with an argument or a claim? Somebody makes a false claim. We know it's false from a Christian perspective. How do we deal with it? By the way, when somebody makes a claim, keep in mind, he or she has the burden of proof. We don't. If somebody says to you the Bible's been changed over the years, you can't trust it, we always want to come up with a defense immediately. Or somebody says there's no God, and we want to make a claim, oh, yes, there is. If somebody makes a claim, they have to come up with the evidence. So if somebody says the Bible's been changed, we say, how? What way could you explain? If somebody says there's no God, we say, really? Why would you say that? So we're not being mean. It's just the person that makes the claim has the burden of proof. And then we need to ask for reasons to support the claim. We need to understand the claim. Then we ask for, okay, I got it. I see what you're saying. What are your reasons? And then the last thing is we test those reasons. Are they good ones? Now let's try an example here. Somebody says, all Christians are hypocrites. Okay, so now we understand the claim. So we say, well, why do you say that? And the person says, because I have a friend who's a Christian, she's a hypocrite. Well, wait a minute. The claim was all Christians are hypocrites, and they've given you one example. Is that enough? No. We can use tactics as well. Greg Koukl has an organization called Stand to Reason, and I love Stand to Reason. I love all of the material they put out. And Koukl wrote a book some time ago. Now they just came out with a 10th anniversary edition. I'd suggest you get that one. But it's fair, but it's interesting and clever ways to use tactics when we're involved in a conversation with somebody to expose these problems. Here are some of the things he says. Ask a question like, what do you mean? Somebody says, I believe in evolution. Our first question is, what do you mean? Make them clarify. Why do you believe that? Okay, so now we know what they mean. Why do you believe it? What are we asking for? Reasons. And realize, by the way, it's okay to judge. When people have bad arguments, Jesus says, judge not, doesn't he? Well, what does he say in John 7? Make a right judgment. So apparently it's okay to judge. Jesus and the other disciples and Paul often judged people, but they judged not hypocritically. So he says there are ways to make a right judgment. Back to Ephesians, here's verse 15. Be very wise how you live. Be very careful how you live as wise. And I left off a few words there. So we're supposed to be wise. Question, of course, is, well, what does that mean to be wise? What's wisdom? Somebody said, well, wisdom really is you apply your experience and knowledge to whatever the situation is. I think that's a good definition. So how do we get wisdom? Well, our experiences. We need to go through things to begin to understand how life works. We can get wisdom from books, and certainly the Bible, but there are other books that have wisdom as well. Not inspired, God-ordained wisdom, but good wisdom. We can look to Christian leaders. Friends can sometimes see a situation from the outside that we're in, but they can see it more clearly. And then wisdom comes from listening. It's so easy, and I fall into this all the time. It's easy to talk. It's very easy to talk, to do data dumps on people and give them all sorts of information, but we need the ability to listen, to really understand what people are saying. And of course, wisdom comes from God. James talks about that in his first chapter. If you lack wisdom, ask God. There's another verse from Ephesians 5, verse 16, making the most of every opportunity. Boy, is that a challenge, huh? How do we do this? Making the most of every opportunity? How about being observant? If somebody is wearing something, or they've got a shirt that says something, or they're carrying a book, or we're in their home and we see a magazine there, or we hear the music they're playing, we're observant, and we can interact based on that. We need to get in conversations. I have a presentation called Getting a Spiritual Conversation Started, so we'll cover that sometime. Asking questions, that's so good, because if you ask the other person questions, maybe they'll ask you questions in return. So asking questions and then really listening, of course. And we need to always be ready. Look what Peter says in 1 Peter 3, always be prepared to give an answer. I've had some amazing stories just in my life where I wasn't expecting to get involved in a conversation, but all of a sudden it popped up. So I'll cover that some other time, but we need to be ready and then pray for opportunities. They'll come if we're alert and ready for them. So think about the point of all apologetics. Why are we doing this? Why do we care? Why do we read about it? Why do we prepare ourselves? Well, in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, here's what Paul says: we're ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. What an amazing opportunity, he says here. We are ambassadors. Think about ambassadors. They go to different countries. What do? They represent their home nation. They need to understand the other nation, but they need to have answers and understand concepts about their own nation. And we're the same way. We need to be able to answer questions about Christ, to make his claims clear, to get rid of misunderstandings. Why? Because God is making his appeal through us. Now, he could have just written things in the clouds. He didn't do that. He could have angels standing on street corners proclaiming the message, but God made his appeal through us. That's humbling, but it's pretty amazing if you think about it. And he says, we implore you on behalf of Christ. Here's our message: be reconciled to God. We're all rebels. We've all shaken our fist at God, decided to go our own way. And the message of Christ is this war doesn't have to continue. We can be reconciled, brought back in harmony with God. What an amazing appeal that we can make. So just some resources. I have a resource list. If you contact me, gary.zacharias@gmail.com. I'll send you a 4-page resource list that has some really good books on it and websites and things like that. There's a book called Kingdom of the Cults. That'll give you some ideas. A book also, What's the Difference? Comparing Christianity to Other Belief Systems. A book called Know What You Believe. That's sort of a theological book, but very simple, easy to read. And then a Bible answer book. There's a book called The Faith by Chuck Colson. There's Coco's book, Tactics. There's a book called Finding Truth, Beauty of Intolerance. And then there's an understanding series put out by Summit Ministries, Understanding the Faith, Understanding the Times, Understanding the Culture. So email me. I'll be glad to send these to you. Well, thanks, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.